Hey, welcome to another episode of Tell Me How You're Mighty, real talk about cheating. It's Chump Lady, Tracy Shorn here, and I'm here with Sarah Gorel. And today we're going to talk about other children and other women. We got a call from Liv.
Hi, Chump Nation. Firstly, I just want to say I love you guys. Tracy, you saved my life at a time that we all know is absolutely horrific. Anyway, moving on. There's something that's been grating on me as I've been on your site and on your Facebook page and now on the Tell Me How You're Mighty podcast. I feel like in general, there's a feeling amongst the Chump Nation people that the children of the other women don't matter. Now, the reason why this grates on me is because unbeknown to me, I was the other woman. My crazy ex was living a triple life for some of our relationship, but double for the entirety. And we had children all at the same time, one of those horrible situations. But anyway, I've always fought for family kind of inclusion. I've never wanted my daughter to be the shunned one, which is actually the way it all worked out. He went back to the ex, okay? Or she was never an ex, just never left her. So I just want to approach this with our Chump Nation family because I'm seeing a lot of hostile words towards the other woman. I just want to put it out there that a lot of us didn't know we were the other women. So when there are kids involved, I just want there to be a little more love for the kids surviving this as well, especially the kids that might come from what you perceive to be the other woman. That's where I'm at right now, raising a child that has been abandoned, neglected by the fuckwit, and his wife who took him back. Or they're not married, but anyway. Chump Nation, what I'm asking you guys is to hold some space for these kids and the other women that didn't know they were the other women. We've all been manipulated. We've all fallen prey to this emotional, psychological abuse. And not all other women are crazy. We all go crazy for a moment because we're with fuckwits. But I just feel the general vibe on Chump Nation is that we should get rid of them. There's so much triangulation. Sometimes it's not that, guys. Sometimes it's just the other woman who is not the other woman, didn't know she was the other woman, trying to survive and trying to do what's best for this kid, trying to remove the fuckwit, really, and let the kids all be family in their, patchwork, hopefully Brady Bunch happy kind of way. So I'd love you guys to talk about this.
So Sarah, what do you think about, have you had this come up? I mean, thinking other women didn't know that they were other women. The only other women in my life knew they were other women. So
it doesn't surprise me. I've read lots of stories of people who are utterly blindsided by it. You hear people that manage to marry two women, don't you? Conduct
yeah.
completely separate lives. So it's no great surprise that there will be many other women who don't know that they're other women because these people are very adept at being quite deceitful and making people feel unique and special. And I guess that a lot of the time, if that people get involved in relationships, they might find out sort of halfway down the line that they are the other woman, but initially there must be so many people that get involved with married men or women and don't know that they're married.
Yeah. No, and I make a distinction on the blog. I'm like, if you're the other woman and you don't know it, then you're a chump, right? I mean, the thing is, I would say to Liv, the person who called in, when you're reading people being flinchy about other women, you have to understand that, and I have to say there's a gender element. Let me say this. I don't see this with straight men or gay men. This only seems to be a straight woman thing with the pick-me dance. But you get these harassing other women. I had people who stalk you, who you're very much in your face and your life, who are very much knowing, right? And that's a whole different kind of mind fuck. And like what you're describing is a guy who had double, triple, God knows how many other lives and other realities, and nobody was aware of the other person, in which case I think you guys are all chumps. And worse, this guy like bred, so you all have children with this man. And again, that's a different level of mind fuck.
And all at the same time, all at a similar time, which is just that is just ridiculously dysfunctional because, of course, the justification, as we always hear for affairs, is that the marriage has run its course, the relationship has got stale, that it's the only way of leaving what is such a difficult. If that was the
Doesn't
case,
match.
why would you bring children into each of these relationships? I mean, this one is interesting because it was not only a double life, but a triple life at one point. How do people have the energy and the time? I mean, you've got children arriving, you've got to go to multiple antenatal appointments. What about if
If
two
you're
of your partners give birth at the same time? How do you explain that? But this person obviously, was a master of this kind of deception.
Yeah, well, and going to appointments and stuff, that just means it's assuming you're an involved parent. I think guys like this, as long as it takes them to ejaculate, is like they're parenting. I mean, the guy, I would say, don't think of this guy as a parent. Think of him as a turkey baster in a suit. I mean, he's genetic material. He's nothing to you. That's how I would move forward. So I do want to address the whole societal scorn about, the other child kind of thing, because I do think that's not fair. I would hate to see that on my site. I usually am like, oh, these poor children dragged into this mess. I don't know anybody hating on the kids, but I'm not saying people don't do that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? I would like, if that guy were my father, I would encourage as a mother, and if that were my parent, like no contact, like have nothing to do with this person. I don't know.
I think it's really difficult though, because however dysfunctional someone is, ultimately they might be genetic material to you or I, but for the children, they are their father. And I think a lot of us, most of us, want to know where we came from. We want a connection with the person that is responsible for us being here. And actually, it's not just the relationship between a father, it's the relationship between the siblings, that you may not have a relationship as you're growing up. In fact, you're very unlikely to, given the circumstances.
Yeah.
But you might want that relationship a little later on. And I remember when I did the BBC late night show quite recently, and there was a fellow guest with me, was a woman who had come into being as a result of her mother having an affair. And she was talking about how difficult that was. And actually, she had siblings or half siblings. And she actually ended up having a very, very positive relationship with them as an adult. But it is a very complicated web that has been spun. And it's very difficult when it's somebody else that's orchestrated it. And then you're the one picking up the pieces and dealing with it. Because I would imagine that he's skipped off somewhere else into the sunset and isn't for a moment even thinking about this.
Right. Well, I remember that discussion, and she sort of said that it was really hard for her because she had to carry the weight of what her father had done around, and it made it, like she was the dirty secret, and she's born as this, it's completely unfair, but it has everything to do with what he did and nothing to do with what she did. And I think maybe those relations, and the other thing I remember about it too is that didn't she ultimately decide that the guy was kind of an asshole and really not, she had done this long pick me dance and the kids were okay, but like he was kind of a jerk and not worth knowing, you know. And I would say a man who has duped three different women into investing in him is like a scary freak. I mean, it takes a huge amount of, I don't know, sociopathy to be able to pull off a triple life. So I wouldn't want my kid around that. And I would, to live listening, like I'm looking at the transcript here. You want this patchwork, hopefully Brady Bunch kind of happy way, let the kids all be family. Maybe when they're adults, I would be like radically accepting that you are enough. Like you're enough family. You are not less than because you're a single mom and your child is not missing out on anything. I would not want to be like that whole like sister wives, like we're all that. That's a big turnoff to me. I don't know. What do you think about this? Brady Bunching, all these disparate. If the guy's out of the picture, sure, but if he's in the
I
picture, no.
I think it's very, I think it's not just people who were inadvertently the other woman that are affected by this. There are people who, their partner then goes on to have children with the other woman or with someone else, and then you kind of feel that genetic link. So it was always my worry that my ex would have children with his new partner, and that could potentially happen. And
Yeah.
and that was not because I care what goes on there at all. I don't, but it would complicate things for my children, and I think it is a complicated situation.
Yeah, and again, it's no fault of the kid who got brought into the world. It's not their fault or your kid's fault or whatever. It's the messy lives of adults. You know, I don't know. When I hear about this kid as a mother, I just kind of want to shelter her from rejection. And the advice, and it's very unsatisfying advice that I give often on the blog is we do not control other people. And when it comes to co-parenting with fuckwits, we absolutely do not control other people's level of investment in their parenting or their child or anything. We don't control it. All we control is ourselves to be the same parent. And I would say you don't control that fuckwit's level of investment in your child, and you don't control the level of investment his other children will have in your child or whatever. And if you're pick me dancing for that validation that you matter, you're setting your child up for rejection. It's not fair, but if someone rejects my kid, I'm like, you are not cool enough to hang out with me and my child. You are not part of my circle. And that's how I would treat it. Like if they want to be part of my world, great, that's gravy. But I would not be inviting a relationship with people who don't want me in their life. I don't know, maybe
I think this also highlights because again, something that you've been challenging for a very long time is the narrative that affairs do no harm, that it's all joyful skipping around and it's all about love and it's all about the passion and people's eyes meeting across a crowded room, and that they can do nothing about it, they cannot control it. And this highlights that you are playing with real human beings, bringing children into it, having an impact on people for a lifetime, and the consequences of what you do are very real and often lifelong.
yeah. And to your point about, oh, they can't control it, they're star-crossed lovers, whatever it is. If you can conduct three separate lives, you have amazing executive functioning. You totally can control everything. I mean, that's the problem. You're like too controlling, None of this is happenstance or I just happened to fall in love with this person. This is all elaborately orchestrated. I mean, this guy's like a puppet master. And again, I would not want my kid around that. I would want my kid far, far away from that level of manipulation. I don't even know how do you even explain that to a child? Like, yeah, I don't know. Papa was a Rolling Stone, like,
Well, no, you see, I actually think that if you get to the bones of this, then she says that she's brought a child that's been abandoned and neglected by the fuckwit,
Mhm.
but that is a child that is raised with love and is at the center of her world. And as you were saying, you can't control other people, but you can control your relationship with your child. The rest are optional extras dancing around in the distance. But she will have a very strong relationship with that child. And I sometimes think, although it's really difficult because I've raised my children as a single parent, and you do get your rewards when they are adults and they begin to see what you've sacrificed and what you've done and how you've been the parent that has been there for them. And although my children were born when I was married, my two youngest do not see their father. They have no desire to see their father. I've given the option to do that, but they're very emotionally stable and happy and successful teenagers. They don't have any issues, and so it's not always a horrible. That families come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Of course, you wouldn't have decided to bring your child into the world in this fashion, that option was taken away from you. You were lied to. You were cheated in the same way as if you'd have been married to him. But you just pick up the pieces and deal with what you cope with this in the best way that you can, and you be the sensible and the good parent.
Yeah. And I look to that point, I think the attitude with which you pick up the pieces and become that sane parent and consider yourself a family goes a long way to how other people perceive you. If you walk around with the shame of like, oh, I'm the other woman versus I'm a chump, I had no idea. I did not knowingly get involved with a man who had other lives. If you just go along with like, this is a terrible thing that happened to me, but I did not choose this. And it's no disgrace. It's no shame on me. I'm raising my child. I'm proud of how I've raised this child. I raised my child with my values. You have nothing to be, I would say flip the script, man. I mean, instead of wanting people to accept you, just go like, are you cool enough to be in my world? And don't carry any of this shame. Don't have your child carry this shame. Live your life. Live your life. And to your point, and I have the same story, having bred with a fuckwit. There's a lot of narrative about how children need both parents. And I drank that Kool-Aid when I was young, divorced mother. And the older I get and how my child's turned out and the lack of investment from his father, if I could do my life over again, I would have had him sign away his parental rights and sign away the child support that I rarely collected anyway, and just gone about my business because he was superfluous. And all he did was add chaos and misery and pain and uncertainty to my child's life. And now he has a very non-existent to tenuous relationship with my kid. Children need one sane parent, and they often don't even get that, but you can be a sane parent. You can show up for your kid. That's what I would do.
And of course, it sounds like she's been through an awful time, being manipulated and never expected to bring a baby into the world in these circumstances. But I often think, I look back and I think I would never have had my children if I'd have known what was going on. I would certainly not have brought a third and fourth child into the world, knowing that at this time my husband was up to no good behind my back. But I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't not have those children.
Yeah.
They brought great joy to my life. And I'm sure that, your child, despite the circumstances in which they came into the world, you wouldn't be without them. They bring great joy, and just focus on that rather than all the antics that go on in the background. Just put them in the background and focus on you and your child, and not all the other characters in this who are largely irrelevant.
Amen. Amen. Well, shall we turn our attention to what our next podcast is going to be about? Because it is the holiday season, and I know you have a sweater that jingles.
I do have a jingling. I do. I must dig it out, actually. Now, we love a little bit of, because this is the time of year, isn't it, where quite often cheaters get caught because it just becomes too much to do 2 Christmases.
Or 3.
Yes, or 3. So we want your festive tales and submissions. What kind of antics have gone on during the holiday period? We would love to hear from you.
Yes, all your fuckwit holiday stories. Or if you have an evil Santa story, like Sarah has evil Santa gifts. I don't know. Maybe you were gifted something a fuckwit gave you and you're taking it to your evil Santa office party. We like those stories too. All of them. Anyway, until have a happy holiday. Happy Thanksgiving if you're here in the US. That's the week we're recording this. And we'll see you next week. That wraps another episode of Tell Me How You're Mighty. You want to leave us a mighty story or a fuckwit of the week submission? Check out our new website, tellmehowyourmighty.com. That's yours spelt YOURE. We've got all the episodes, show notes, links to our guests, and you can see the tea room where Sarah and I first met. If you enjoyed this episode, please review the podcast and follow us. Thanks. See you next week.